Okay, now I think it always becomes clearer if we take a case, a real case. And in fact, there are not that many cases in GIZ because we are not using that methodology so systematically. So if you go to different programs, you don't necessarily, please correct me. If you have more examples, I think we all would be very interested to hear about it. But business model canvas utilization is not so frequent, at least to what I have seen in GIZ. So here are two examples. The first is Attiéké production in Burkina Faso. And that's a case that has been presented by PDA. We've been working together. This is the Program for Agricultural Development. It talks about a value chain because PDA has been working on 5 value chains for a couple of years, one of which is cassava. So the next slide now is the value chain map, and in fact, this again visualizes the idea that I introduced in the beginning, that if you have a value chain, the different yellow boxes here stand in for types of enterprises that make up the value chain. So what do we have here? We have a market for Attiéké, and this is mainly a domestic market. In Burkina Faso, it's not exported. It is all consumed in the country. It starts with producing cassava, and that's mainly small growers, smallholders. Then it goes to collectors of the cassava roots, and that is an intermediary trade, and then on to milling and attiéké making, milling the roots and making the produce. You can see that we have distinguished here 2 stages, 2 key activities, if you may say so. If you follow the business model canvas terminology, then it's key activities. One is milling, the other is attiéké making. And then from the attiéké makers, it goes on to traders and retailers who sell it on the domestic market. Here is one interesting other type of enterprise. And I said, I think at the beginning that Attiéké is a product that is that originates in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. So there are importers who also supply to the Burkina Faso market. It's not all Burkina production. Importers are competitors, and much of the produce has been coming through imports in the past. And then as that domestic market has been growing, instead of importing at relatively high prices, there was the idea to import just the milled roots, paste, that's called paste. So there are importers of cassava paste, and if you import cassava paste, you don't have to mill. You can make attiéké right away, and then that would be a Burkina produce, but with an import input. It is a bit simplified. I agree, the cassava or attiéké, for that matter, value chain probably has more details, and you could differentiate the types of growers more. But in terms of the actual processing, the milling and attiéké making, I think this is pretty much what you find. So with the red circles, you find now types of companies, types of enterprises that engage in milling and attiéké making, and there are 3 of them. It starts with the artisanal producers who build on cassava paste that is imported, so no milling, and then sell attiéké through traders to the domestic market. Now, these artisanal producers rely, of course, on the importers of cassava paste. And sometimes there are limitations to how much is being imported, and also the price is, of course, relatively high. So there is a second business model that works differently. It still has Attiéké as its value proposition, yeah, but it includes now milling. So instead of buying the paste, you buy directly from small growers, do the milling yourself, and make the attiéké, and then it follows on. Sometimes, and that arrow is missing here, it's also a combination of own milling plus paste purchase. And of course, the advantage here is, or the evolution, the next step in the evolution of a business model is that it includes the milling process using manual techniques. So this is really hand milling, grinding. You can easily tell that doing this by hand is very hard work, and it's not so easy to get people to do it. So there's yet another a business model, the mechanized millers, and they use, I think I've shown it, they use some simple milling technology, like an electrical or gasoline-driven mill that saves that hard labor of manual grinding. And of course, the mechanized millers certainly and for sure combine their own milling with Attiéké making. They buy from growers, sometimes bigger growers. They would not buy paste and would, of course, have to find the cassava in order to fill their capacity for milling. Otherwise, the product is still the same. So the value proposition as such does not change. It's what changes is the capacity of these different business models. So if you translate that now into the business model canvas, this is what you get. And it is a bit simplified again, just for the ease of discussion today. You have the value proposition in the middle. It's packaged Attiéké. I showed that the photo of the product. And this is now the artisanal producers. Their key partners are the suppliers of paste that import from Côte d'Ivoire. Their key activities is they have to get that paste and they have to make the Attiéké and package it. What they would need as key resources is, well, they'll have a small building where they can work also in the rainy season, and small equipment only, all for manual production. This is pans, pots, a series of things. You've seen them on the photo also. At least big pots are needed and all kinds of small implements. So key resources that are not very valuable. Customer relationships is to, of course, urban, mainly or urban, but also rural consumers who buy the product. There are traders, as you've seen, regular and repeated sales to them. The channel is either through traders who sell to retailers or directly to retailers. As far as I know, not much of direct sales. Maybe in the villages where those artisanal Attiéké makers or artisanal producers are located, some direct sales. Cost structure, very low fixed cost, but high variable cost due to the high price of paste and the revenue from sales of Attiéké. Okay, so you can summarize, and that is the system that describes very briefly the artisanal producer. And just to show you, we are now talking about this first, from top to down, the first type of business model in the value chain map. Now let me move on to the next one, the mechanized millers. What has changed? They still make Attiéké. So packaged Attiéké remains as value proposition. It's still the main product. But, and that is now interesting, as they have invested in an electrical mill, you see this here in the key resources, a mechanical mill, and buildings, small buildings to put that equipment in under the roof. You have created capacity that needs to be filled in order to break even, in order to have the cost advantage of that mechanical mill. And here now, the possibility is that you cannot only sell your Attiéké itself, you can also sell the milling service for others. So here is a second value proposition. You can say, okay, here is my mill. I have more capacity of milling than I have cassava to mill. Please come, neighbors, and utilize my mill. I'll charge you a service fee, of course. And that is also a value proposition. This time it is a service value proposition, and therefore a second source of revenue. The key activities change. Milling cassava now is the electrical milling. You have other key partners. Apart from the suppliers of cassava, you also have suppliers of milling equipment. You have maybe technical service providers. You need an electrician. You need a mechanic. These are all things that belong to the a business model, you can already see that through introducing that piece of technology, different boxes in the business model canvas change. I think that can be done relatively quickly. It's not too difficult to fill in these boxes, and it already tells you a story. Of course, what is interesting is the cost side and the revenue side. Does it really make money? And under what conditions does it make money? That is the next point. So I'm now presenting you the results of some of the financial analysis. Originally, we also thought that we might go into the details of how to calculate and how those calculations came about. We said that maybe that's leading us too far and we are not really sitting together here around a table to work on those numbers. So I'm just presenting to you the results of a calculation. I can tell you that you definitely need an Excel sheet to do those calculations because you have to put those numbers together, and as they are interacting, no way out. An Excel sheet calculation is required to get to those points. Now let me first present some of the key parameters. Daily milling capacity in cassava in cassava tons. If you do it from paste, there is an around 150 kg per day person capacity. So one person can process 150 kgs of paste, max. Some do less than that, but that's about the capacity. So you can already see that the capacity of a manual producer, an artisanal producer, is the number of people he engages. So the more people, the more you can do. Manual milling, if it is really not only the making of Attiéké, but you have to first mill it, then that parameter would be around 100 to 150 kgs, also max, what you can do to produce the paste. And that changes quite a bit if you go to a mechanical mill, then you stand at 1 ton per day or 1.2 tons per day, depending on the equipment. So here we have around 6 to 7 times more capacity per day if we compare it to a one-person micro enterprise. Of course, if you hire people, then the capacity of the smaller artisanal enterprises would also go up. So a lot has to do with the number of workers. In fact, if you look at the artisanal producer, you find that this is mostly a one-person show. You have basically ladies producing this, and it very much depends on how much time they have. So these are micro enterprises. Now we've seen also that some of those ladies hire people to do the manual milling, yeah, and work for them. This is a rather exceptional case. I thought in the beginning that this might be more frequent, but if you look for the numbers, you find that this is only an intermediate step. The real change is between the first Attiéké from paste to the third mechanized milling, where of course now you have a capacity, and in order to fill that capacity, you have to hire people. As much of the processes are still manual. You have to make the Attiéké, and you only have equipment for the milling. Means that you have saved labor on the milling, but you need more for the higher volume of Attiéké made. So the annual production goes up, as you can see, 5 times probably around, at a likely capacity utilization now for the manual labor of 100%, because everyone you hire will be occupied full time. But if it is a mechanized milling, then of course you have to make sure that you get enough cassava, and we have seen that maybe 60%, I'm not so sure whether this figure is right, but say around 60% was our estimate, to say that that is what they do for themselves. So how much cassava they can buy to mill themselves. The rest would be service milling, where you offer the milling capacity, the mill as such, to your neighbors, and they buy the cassava. Consequence is, of course, if you move from left to right, from paste Attiéké to the mechanized milling, your capital utilization grows. You have only small equipment When you do paste, you also need more of that same type of equipment as you expand production. And you have to buy a mechanical cassava grinder or mill, which costs, including the connection to the electric grid, €2,500. Now, if you add the two things up, you see that this is already going up. It also means that you need to have more short-term capital, and this is something that sometimes is underestimated. It's not just the fact that you invest into the equipment, you also have to pay for the cassava that you have to buy in order to make that mill run. So you have to buy, you have to stock, you have to utilize that material, and that means that the current assets also go up. In short, you have a much higher capacity, but you also have a higher capital input, and you have to finance that additional investment that goes from 3,000 to 11,500. That money has to come from somewhere. Now, this is the profit, cost and profit calculation. We start again with the capacity utilization, talk about the volume of cassava obtained, cassava processed, Attiéké obtained. Then we have a fixed cost that depends, of course, on your investment into fixed assets, the mill, the buildings. That is repair, depreciation, renewal. That equipment doesn't last long. Even the mill as such has a lifetime of not more than 6 years max. We have the variable cost for the raw material, the labor, energy, water, etc., which in the combination delivers us an average unit cost per ton of Attiéké, given the capacity utilization we start with. And you can see that, in fact, the average cost per ton goes down. If the Attiéké maker from paste has a production cost of 413, it goes down to 336 in the mechanized milling. Why is that so? First of all, the imported paste costs a lot of money. Labor needs to be utilized for the manual milling. And we have, of course, a higher efficiency in mechanized milling. And therefore, the unit cost goes down. The volume goes up. Prices are the same for both types. And you can see that the total cost goes up, yes, but also the total revenue. And you see immediately that the profit, I shouldn't say explodes, but in the comparison between the artisanal simple model and the mechanized model, you have, of course, a development of that micro enterprise that produces a lot more income. Some observations on the differences. You can see that yourself in the boxes. I have just put in the critical and interesting issues in red color. For the Attiéké made from paste, we have seen that the availability and price of paste is limiting. You not always get it, and it costs a lot of money. Therefore, high unit cost and the lowest profit of the three types of business models. Second, manual grinding is hard work. It's not very easy to get people do it. So the availability of workers is limited, and you can't pay much, because if you pay a good salary, you're no longer profitable. So this is a very, very unfortunate combination. You create jobs, but only at very low wages. Otherwise, it doesn't add up, and still produces a low profit. So in fact, the only solution, if you want to expand Attiéké production and also create some jobs and bring more Attiéké to the consumers, is the mechanized milling plus service milling. But here again, of course, we have the question, where does the cassava come from? And that initially also has been an issue. Therefore, it is put in red. You have to organize your supplies, and you have to make sure that you get sufficient cassava. We are going to get back to that specific problem when we come to the rice case. Last slide on this example. And I tried to interpret this now. I think it is one aspect of business model analysis to produce numbers, but more important for us is really what we make of it and how we interpret those insights. So here, an attempt to interpret the results. we can see that the mechanized milling model is an attractive solution for small-scale Attiéké producers. It is more profitable than the other two. Investment is in the order of 6,500 euro or dollar. That development step, so getting those $6,500 is not too much of a problem and feasible for small enterprises. Now, while it saves hard and relatively unproductive labor, it creates jobs in other processes, in the Attiéké making as such, and in supplying enterprises. I quoted already the electrician and the mechanic. We also think that if you want to improve social conditions and job quality in rural places, we also have to think about those kinds of jobs that, of course, have a higher income and higher quality, that are the types of jobs we are looking for. And of course, the volume goes up. The artisanal producers still benefit when we invest or support that mechanical producer because they can use the milling service. The technology and business model are open source in the sense that we know what it takes. The technology is well known, the numbers are known. Here we are not into any business secrets. That is something that can be replicated. So the idea was to say, if we have a mechanical miller in one place, then maybe 20 kilometers away in another village, we can support people in making that investment and set up a second, third, fourth, etc. mechanical mill. There are altogether now 50 of such businesses all over Burkina Faso. And the question is, how many more could it become? And this is exactly where, of course, now our limitation is. What about end market demand? If a region is served, it does not make sense to support additional investment. And here is a critical thing. If you come up with a nice and interesting, and I think also from a development policy point of view, very attractive business model solution, we also have to make sure that we don't overdo, because you can easily run into an oversupply problem here.